What if the reason you feel stuck isn't your past, isn't your parents, isn't your trauma, but a story you keep telling yourself? That question alone makes a lot of people uncomfortable, because if it's true, then freedom is closer than you think, and scarier than you expected. This is the core idea behind the courage to be disliked, and fair warning, once you hear it, you can't unhear it. But here's where it gets real. Most of us walk around believing our past has us on a leash. Childhood wounds, bad relationships, missed opportunities. We say things like, "That's just how I am," or "You don't understand what I've been through." And listen, those experiences were real. They mattered. They hurt. But Adlerian psychology asks a dangerous question. What if your past doesn't control you? What if you're using it? Now, before you shut this off, stay with me. The philosopher in the book explains this to a young man who's angry at life, angry at the world, angry at himself. The youth believes trauma is destiny, that if you were hurt badly enough, you're broken forever. The philosopher calmly says something radical. Your behavior isn't caused by the past. It's guided by your purpose in the present. And that flips everything. Because instead of asking, "What happened to me?" you start asking, "What am I trying to avoid right now?" That's the uncomfortable part. Sometimes we cling to pain because it protects us. It protects us from rejection, from failure, from responsibility. If I believe I'm damaged, I never have to risk being fully seen. And here's the pattern interrupt. Ever notice how your fear always sounds logical? "I'm just being realistic. I'm not ready yet. I'll try when things calm down." Yeah, that's not wisdom. That's fear wearing a business suit. Adler calls this teleology, a fancy word for a simple truth. We move toward goals, not away from causes. Even self-sabotage has a purpose. Even procrastination has a job. Even low self-esteem is doing something for you, usually keeping you safe, small, invisible. But safe doesn't mean fulfilled. And this is where the hero's journey begins. Not with confidence, not with clarity, but with courage. Because the moment you accept, "I can choose a different meaning," you also accept responsibility. No more hiding behind labels, no more blaming the past, no more waiting for permission. And yeah, that's terrifying. Quick reality check. If your past truly controlled you, change would be impossible. Yet people change every day. So what's really changing? Their interpretation, their goal, their courage. Here's a line from the book that quietly punches you in the chest. Life is not something given to you. It's something you choose. And suddenly the question isn't, "Why am I like this?" It's, "What do I want my life to stand for now?" That's when the youth pushes back. He says, if people just decide their meaning, wouldn't that make life selfish? And the philosopher smiles, because this is where most people misunderstand freedom. Freedom doesn't mean doing whatever you want. It means taking responsibility for your choices without blaming others. And that leads us to the next uncomfortable truth. Most of your pain comes from other people. Their opinions, their expectations, their approval. But here's where it gets real. What if the biggest source of your anxiety is trying to control something you never could? Wait till you hear this. Because in the next part, we're diving into the idea that all problems are interpersonal problems, and the one rule that can instantly give you mental freedom. Here's a tough question. How much of your life is quietly controlled by what you think other people expect from you? Your career choices, your personality, even the way you speak or stay silent. Most stress doesn't come from work, or money, or time. It comes from people. And according to Adlerian psychology, every single human problem is a relationship problem. Yeah, even the ones you blame on yourself. But here's where it gets real. The philosopher introduces a concept that sounds simple and absolutely wrecks people-pleasing. It's called task separation. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Here's the idea. In every interaction, there are your tasks and other people's tasks. Your task is what you control, your actions, your effort, your honesty. Other people's reactions? Not your task. Their feelings? Not your task. Their approval? Definitely not your task. And yet, most of us live our lives trying to complete tasks that aren't ours. We twist ourselves into shapes hoping someone else won't be disappointed. We stay quiet so someone else won't be uncomfortable. We play small so no one else feels threatened. Quick pattern interrupt. Ever notice how exhausting it is trying to manage other people's emotions? That's because you were never meant to. The youth in the book struggles with this hard. He says, "If I stop caring what people think, won't I be hated?" And the philosopher doesn't sugarcoat it. Yes, some people won't like you. And that's the point. Because the goal of life isn't to be liked by everyone. It's to live truthfully. Here's the trap we fall into. We believe approval equals safety, so we chase it. But approval is a moving target. The moment you get it from one person, you're terrified of losing it. So you perform. You edit yourself. You become a version that feels acceptable, not alive. Adler calls this a vertical relationship. One person above, one person below. Approval, praise, rewards. But real freedom only exists in horizontal relationships. Equal ground, mutual respect, no one auditioning. And here's the uncomfortable truth. The moment you stop living for approval, you will feel lonely. At first. Because people who benefited from your silence won't like your voice. But that loneliness is temporary. What replaces it is peace. And peace is addictive. Now here's where the book gets even sharper. The philosopher says something that sounds almost cruel. If you're living for recognition, you're living someone else's life. Think about that. Every time you ask, "What will they think?" you hand them the steering wheel. And suddenly your life isn't yours anymore. Another pattern interrupt. If everyone likes you, you're probably lying to yourself. Growth always disappoints someone. That's not failure. That's evidence of change. This doesn't mean becoming cold, or selfish, or isolated. Adler is clear about this. You still care about others. You just don't obey them. There's a difference. Caring is compassion. Obeying is fear. And fear is a terrible life coach. Here's the shift that changes everything. Do what you believe is right. Let others feel what they feel. That's task separation. And when you live this way, something strange happens. Your anxiety drops. Because anxiety is born from trying to control outcomes that were never yours. You speak more honestly. You move with more confidence. You stop negotiating with your soul. But here's where it gets real. Once you stop seeking approval, you face a bigger challenge. Who are you, without applause? Because in the next part, we're diving into the hardest truth of all. To be free, you must have the courage to be disliked. And that changes everything. Let's go there. What if the life you want is sitting right behind the thing you're most afraid of? Disapproval, criticism, being misunderstood. This is the moment in the book where the philosopher stops being gentle. And honestly, this is where most people check out. Because he says it plainly. Freedom requires the courage to be disliked. Not tolerated, not quietly approved. Disliked. And the youth immediately pushes back. Humans are social. We need acceptance. We can't live alone. And the philosopher agrees. But then he drops the truth bomb. You don't need approval to belong. You need contribution. Read that again. Belonging doesn't come from being liked. It comes from being useful, from showing up as you are and adding value without performing. Here's the lie we grow up believing. If I'm disliked, I'm doing something wrong. But Adler flips that completely. Being disliked often means you've stopped living for other people's expectations, and that threatens them. Think about it. The moment you stop people-pleasing, someone calls you selfish. The moment you set boundaries, someone says you've changed. The moment you grow, someone feels left behind. That discomfort? That's not your failure. That's your freedom activating. Quick pattern interrupt. Have you ever noticed how the most authentic people are rarely universally loved? Exactly. Now the philosopher introduces one of the most misunderstood ideas in the book. Inferiority feelings are normal. Everyone has them. They're not a flaw. They're fuel. The problem isn't feeling inferior. The problem is what you do with it. Some people use it to grow, to learn, to contribute. Others use it to dominate, to control, to seek superiority over others. That's where relationships break. Adler doesn't want you to feel better than. He wants you to feel equal, horizontal, human. And here's the shift that changes how you see success. Stop asking, am I better than them? Start asking, how can I contribute? Contribution is the antidote to insecurity. Because when you're contributing, you're no longer obsessing over yourself. You're connected. And connection, not praise, is what the human nervous system actually craves. Now let's get painfully honest. Most of us don't want freedom. We want permission. Permission to be ourselves without consequences. But that doesn't exist. Every choice costs something. If you live for approval, you lose yourself. If you live authentically, you lose some people. You don't get to avoid pain. You only get to choose which pain you live with. And here's the uncomfortable part. Many people stay miserable because misery is familiar. Freedom feels dangerous when you've spent your life being managed by fear. The youth asks, what if I live my truth and end up alone? The philosopher answers calmly, you won't be alone if you live with social interest, meaning care about others, help others, respect others, but don't live for them. There's a massive difference. You don't need to rebel, you don't need to provoke, you just need to stop betraying yourself. And the moment you do, your energy changes. You speak differently. You walk differently. You stop explaining yourself so much. Not because you're arrogant, but because you're grounded. Here's the quiet superpower of being disliked. You stop negotiating your identity. You stop asking permission to take up space. You stop shrinking to fit rooms you've outgrown. And suddenly, the right people find you. Not because you're impressive, but because you're real. Now here's the twist most people miss. The courage to be disliked is not about rejecting society. It's about participating in it without lying. That's real maturity. And that leads us to the next question. If you stop chasing approval, where do you actually belong? Because in the next part, we're going to talk about community, connection, and why true belonging has nothing to do with fitting in. So here we are. The final question. If you stop living for approval, if you accept the courage to be disliked, if you stop performing, where do you actually belong? This is where the philosopher delivers the most comforting truth in the entire book. You don't belong because people accept you. You belong because you contribute. Belonging is not something you earn later. It's something you practice now. And this is where most of us get it backwards. We think, I'll contribute once I feel confident. I'll show up once I'm accepted. I'll be myself once I feel safe. But Adler flips it. Confidence comes after contribution. Acceptance follows action. Safety is built by participation, not the other way around. The philosopher introduces Adler's idea of community feeling. It's the sense that you are part of something larger, not above others, not below others, equal, horizontal, human. And here's the painful truth. Many people feel lonely not because they're unlovable, but because they're standing on the sidelines, waiting to be chosen, waiting to be validated, waiting to be invited. Adler says happiness begins the moment you decide to step forward and be useful, without conditions. No applause required, no guarantees, just contribution. Quick reality check. Have you noticed that the people who feel the most fulfilled are usually the ones helping, teaching, creating, or serving? Exactly. Now let's talk about self-acceptance, because this part is misunderstood constantly. Self-acceptance is not, I love everything about myself. It's, I accept myself as I am and still take responsibility for my life. You don't need to feel confident to act courageously. You don't need to feel healed to be helpful. You don't need permission to matter. The philosopher warns about something Adler calls life lies. These are excuses we tell ourselves to avoid responsibility. I'm shy, so I can't speak up. I'm broken, so I can't love. I'm too busy, so I can't help. They feel safe, but they keep you isolated. And here's the line that quietly hits hardest. If you avoid contribution, you avoid belonging. Now the youth asks one final question. What does it mean to live seriously without being too serious? And this is the book's mic drop moment. Life is not a straight line toward a goal. It's a series of moments, tasks, choices, and freedom lives in the here and now. Not in fixing your past, not in controlling the future, but in choosing courage today, right now. This conversation ends with a realization. You don't need to wait until you're fearless. You don't need to erase your insecurity. You don't need to become someone else. You need courage. The courage to take responsibility. The courage to let others dislike you. The courage to contribute anyway. Because happiness is not a reward for being perfect. It's a byproduct of living honestly. And here's the final takeaway, the one that changes everything. Freedom is not being loved by everyone. Freedom is knowing you can be disliked and still move forward, still contribute, still belong, still live fully. So ask yourself this tonight. Whose task am I carrying that isn't mine? Where am I shrinking to stay comfortable? And what would change if I chose courage over approval just once today? You don't need to be fearless. You just need to stop lying to yourself. Because the courage to be disliked isn't about rebellion, it's about peace. And if this message hit home, if it challenged you in a quiet way, don't just scroll, subscribe, and start living a life that actually feels like yours.